Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Marcus Gorman back to the podcast today, not for a celebration of semi-centennials, but for a celebration of the centennial, 100 years ago in film. How are we doing, Marcus?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for coming back. We have an episode on Brewster McCloud you should check out. That was a lot of fun, talking about that crazy Robert Altman movie and the career of Shelley Duvall. Today, I wanted to bring you back for this bonus episode. You know, I started doing this last year on the podcast where I like to look at kind of the world of film 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, kind of going beyond 50 and kind of seeing what the world of film was like in other kind of anniversary years. And I thought we'd start in 2021, looking back 100 years ago, 1921, especially because the film we're going to mostly talk about today, The Kid, actually was released at the end of January of 1921. So it's like almost to the week we're recording this, about 100 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think. Has film changed at all, Marcus, in 100 years? What do you think?
No, not at all. Everything's exactly the same.
Nothing changed.
No. There was no introduction of sound, no going from a visual medium to a more audio medium for many years. There's no widescreen. There's no digital. Nothing.
Yeah, Charlie Chaplin actually got to make a few silent films before he was kind of not allowed to anymore, right? Because as we'll talk about a little bit, like City Lights is very much kind of a silent film made in 31, 10 years after The Kid. But I wanted to start by just asking you, Marcus, what role has silent movies played in your life? Do you have any favorites from that era? Like, what's your take on silent movies?
Well, silent movies are a way to remind everybody that this is a visual medium. For some reason, actually for very open reasons, this kind of has slowed down being a visual medium, at least in the mainstream. How do I explain this? We have, and certainly in mainstream American cinema, we have this obsession with realism. Even like fantasy things or MCU comic book films, they always need to feel real to us for some reason, and that is something that was not true during the silent era. That's when people were experimenting, trying to do everything else, trying to find this still very new medium. In the grand scheme of arts, film is still one of the newest ones. So silent film, a lot of them have been lost to time because they were not restored properly. They were on very flammable product. And so we've lost something like I forget the number, but something like 70% of these movies we no longer have. They're completely gone. And so we are not, like, the average person is not raised on silent film. I wasn't raised on silent film. A lot of people think of it as like something you watch in a filmmaking class to like give you the foundation, the basics. And say when you are a filmmaker who wants to get more visually in touch with what film can be, you will maybe put on a silent film to sort of reacclimate your brain to what this medium could be.
Do you have any favorite kind of silent films from that era? What kind of come to mind? Were you watching any before film school, or was that kind of your introduction?
Not a whole lot. Like I had seen a few Chaplin films. I'd seen a lot of Buster Keaton. I love Buster Keaton.
Yes, he's great.
If we're talking if we're doing like the Bertolucci movie, The Dreamers. With Eva Green and Michael Pitt and Louis Garrel. Michael Pitt and Louis Garrel actually argue of who's better, Chaplin or Buster Keaton. And Buster Keaton comes down to, you're an American, and if you like Charlie Chaplin, you're probably European, and they have a long conversation about this. So with Buster Keaton, I like, say, The Electric House or College or The General, his big one, which still has stunts in it that you can't get away with doing today. In A Wilderness, I think it's called, or A Wilderness. A Wilderness is a play, so it's not that one. He does this weird stunt in front of a waterfall that is absolutely terrifying and looks like he's about to die any second.
Did Buster Keaton make feature films in the 20s, or was it mostly shorts?
I think it was mostly shorts.
Okay.
I'm not the best person to ask about this. Silent film is very good for horror.
Yes,
that's very good. So they can't let anything get in the way other than like some pre-written music and sound effects that you will be playing live. I like F.W. Murnau's Sunrise. That is most people point to that as like that is the height of silent cinema, and for good reason. It's a great melodrama. I can handle melodrama in silent films in a way that I don't always like in modern films. And maybe it's just the nostalgia of what what 100 years ago was, um, what art over the what art 100 years ago represented, 90 years ago, 80 years ago. They had a certain emotionality that we don't accept from mainstream cinema
Mhm.
nowadays.
And
Um,
Sunrise came out, I want to say 29, right? Wasn't at the very end of the decade.
that sounds about right.
I believe it's one of the first two Oscar winners for Best Picture. Like it was Wings got like one Best Picture, and then they also gave Sunrise like it was like the only year where we had two.
Right. Yeah.
And that was like at the very end of silent cinema, right? Like 29 was kind of the last full year of it, I want to say.
Yeah, and like you were saying before we started recording, that silent filmmakers still make plenty of silent films after the introduction of sound,
Hmm.
usually to their own detriment and their own
Yeah.
career. This is the Sunset Boulevard problem.
Mm.
That
Yep.
the skills in one form, one subset of film, cannot apply to the other.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And
Silent film is very good for comedy. That's why I like Buster Keaton. That's why I like
mhm.
Harold Lloyd.
Harold
I like
Lloyd is great too.
He's great, and
Yeah.
these are all yeah. And this is a weird thing to say. I am a semi-trained clown. I am not a fully trained clown, but I did like study it a bit when I was young, and I
Hmm.
was briefly in a clown troupe.
Oh,
Only
oh wow.
recently, and I was semi-trained by somebody who knows the Buffon technique, this French buffoonery
Hmm.
type of stuff, where you're being very disgusting and you're trying to use that disgust to challenge royalty and the bourgeois.
Uh-huh.
So silent film is a very good way to get back to basics in what physicality meant. Like
Hmm.
like you think a thing, you set up for the thing, and you do the thing, and each part of that is a different piece of what you have to do in order to sell the joke,
Hmm.
to sell the personality, to sell the emotion, and you can't really get that from a lot of modern films. I did just
Hmm.
watch a Carl Reiner film from '69 called The Comic,
Okay.
which stars Dick
Dick
Van
Van
Dyke.
Dyke, yeah.
Yeah, where he plays a silent movie star who gets washed up by kind of being an a-hole, like a lot of them ended
Oh,
up
okay.
being. And it's not a good movie, but there is a 10-minute sequence, like in the first act, where it shows all the fake short films he was in as this Chaplin-esque,
Hmm.
Keaton-esque character. And Dick Van Dyke is the exact person to pull that kind of physicality off. He
Hmm.
clearly studied silent clowns, not just for the comic, but for Mary Poppins, for the Dick Van Dyke Show, for everything.
Hmm.
And people in film don't do this quite right anymore. Bill Irwin is our great current clown, but he doesn't
Mm.
really make films. He will show up like in My Blue Heaven and Popeye, but he is a
Yeah.
stage clown first and foremost.
Yeah.
So that's a long answer. Silent film means something that we should strive to at least bring into what
Mm.
modern film is, because once sound came in, they couldn't really move the camera much anymore, so it
Mm.
became they all became one shot scenes that felt like plays, and
Hmm.
we are still feeling that ripple today.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like
You have to think about sound and if you're shooting outside today, you have to like deal with that.
and
Whereas they
the
didn't have to in the 20s.
and the average scene for an average mainstream American feature is pretty much just coverage.
Hmm.
And that is a very it's not
Yeah.
what film is for. It can be. I love stagey films that are based on plays.
Hmm.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is great.
Hmm.
Linklater's Tape, which takes place in one motel room, is really well shot, but
Yep.
sometimes it can be very claustrophobic. And even when you don't intend that, whether or not it's based on a play, um,
One Night in Miami, the new film by Regina King, is all mostly in a room,
it
and
is.
it's really solid.
And all praise to the movie. Um, it made me want to see the play
Yeah,
more than
no, that's
anything
true.
else.
Yeah, no, I felt the same thing. I kind
I'm
of
like,
wanted that experience a little bit more than the film.
this seems like a great play. It
Yeah.
and all respect to everything Regina King did, it kind of looked like an HBO movie.
Okay. Yeah, and that can be tricky, right? Especially on that kind of level of doing a play, make adapting it into a film. It's hard. I mean, sometimes that was her first film, so that was
Totally.
like it was big on her to take on a play as kind of her first movie. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, she's actually very good at visual representation. She
Hmm.
directed an episode of This Is Us
Hmm.
that was very well constructed on a visual level. So it's not that she can't do it; it's that she simply couldn't with this play,
Hmm.
and it's incredibly acted. All four of them are remarkable,
Hmm.
but it does kind of represent what I'm talking about. That we don't always think about the camera angle,
Yeah.
the editing. We just want to get through the scene, and it's just
Yeah.
like you have a wide, you
Mhm.
have close-ups, you have a couple mediums, and you put them together later, as opposed to planning out each and every shot. This is what digital filmmaking has done to us.
Mhm.
It really opens up the world and gives you a lot of choices. But if you compare, say, a Marvel fight scene versus um, a kung fu film from the 70s, the kung fu film from the 70s, each shot will be its own setup that is telling a specific story within each shot. It is not
Mhm.
just here's a fight from 6 different angles.
Yeah, exactly.
So that all ties back to silent films,
Yeah, and as you
technically.
say, it was, some directors into the early 30s were still trying to do silent film, and the audience had kind of abandoned that, and now it was all about the talkie. That's what everyone was obsessed with. And you look at a lot of films from like 30, 31, 32, and there's some really good ones there, but there's also some that are I've watched on Turner Classic Movies that are just like really stiff. Every shot the camera's on sticks and not moving, and you're like, and
And that's
so people
fine.
just I think about, like, if silent film had gone another 5 years, right, we probably would have had some amazing, amazing movies in the early 30s. Because if you look at like a lot of the great silent films of like 28 and 29, my personal favorite, which is Passion of Joan of Arc, that's probably my favorite
Yes,
silent.
thank you.
That's
Okay,
my
good.
favorite
Thank you.
silent film.
I should have done some preliminary research of things I like.
Yeah. And then, you just see like they're really developing the craft by the end of the decade. And then, oh, nope, that's out. We're doing talkies. And then it's like they have to start over again. And because audience they wanted sound now. And so they weren't going to, unless it's maybe City Lights, which came out in 31, they
Right.
just weren't really going to give it the time of day. It's kind of like black and white, right? Black and white kind of went away in the mid 60s. And then every year in like the 70s, you'll see maybe one or two in black and white, but they're very seldom. And
And
especially now.
and now you're not even allowed to make them. Studios say this does not sell overseas at all.
Yeah.
At all. So you have to give us a color version too.
is
Without
there is
question.
there a color version of Schindler's List? I hope not.
I don't know about that, but I
Yeah.
do know that the Men Who Wasn't There,
Oh, okay.
that's technically, I think, shot in color and then degraded
Oh, okay.
intentionally. And there's a movie that played the festival circuit a couple years ago called To the Stars by Martha Stevens.
Mm.
When we programmed it at SIF, it was black and white. When it came to VOD, it was in color
Oh, weird.
because they
Okay.
actually shot it in two ways,
Yeah.
because that is the only way to
Some
sell it.
aren't some films shot like on black and white like film, and then they can't really make it color? Isn't that a
Correct.
thing?
But like, and it's also it's a way. I, I'm not a technical person in terms of
Mhm.
film. I'm a viewer, but I know I believe the artist also shot in color and then degraded.
Okay, yeah, I was going to bring up that title too, because that was probably the most famous, more recent film that was like a
Right.
silent film. Yeah.
Which is a totally pleasant, fun film. It doesn't have the rhythm right at all.
Okay.
The dialogue cards are actually misplaced and mistimed throughout the entire film, and it bothered me so much, but I couldn't say it because I felt like such a freaking nerd.
That was a trippy year. I mean, there were so many great films that came out in 2011, and then the winner of Best Picture is the silent film The Artist. Kind of came out of nowhere, and that was in the last years of the Harvey Weinstein machine, right? Of
I
the
was about to
Weinstein.
say,
you
it
know,
didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of Weinstein.
Weinstein, yeah, exactly. Like his last, what was that? Maybe his last big year was The Artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I enjoyed it. It wasn't great. I liked it. I've never wanted to revisit it. It's 10
Um,
years on, it's
yeah,
like, so,
Hazanavicius has made he's made better films, but he's always been a goofy parodist.
mhm.
He made with who's the star of Jean Dujardin.
Jean Dujardin.
He made OSS 37, I think it's called. It's a
Okay.
series of spy movies that are parodies of the spy movies of the era,
Mhm,
and they're super fun and not at all like
mhm.
hokey or making a point. It's just a goofy spy movie.
Yeah.
And then he also made Godard Mon Amour
Mhm.
2-3 years ago, which is his biopic of Godard starring Louis Garrel.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it's not very deep, but it looks great.
Mhm.
And each section of the film is in a different style of one of Godard's films.
Oh, interesting.
So he's always just kind of having fun with it. And
Uh-huh.
that's what I think silent filmmakers were kind of doing. They were just trying things out because they could and because nobody was telling them they couldn't.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I think I want to say the last 50 years, I'm trying to think of other silent films. There's Silent Movie by Mel Brooks,
which has
which is really
which has
fun.
one
One
word.
what's right?
Yeah, and it's it's the clown who says no.
No.
Yeah, that I'm yeah.
Is that it? I'm trying to think of any other
Oh,
in the
it's Marcel
last 50
Marceau.
years.
Yeah.
You know,
Um,
like an actual like feature length silent movie. Like, I mean, there's a lot of films where dialogue is to a minimum, and kind of like there's a lot of films like that, but it's definitely something that was most prominent in the 1910s and 20s,
yeah,
kind of going out of style around 29. I want to say I feel like that's the year of Blackmail by Hitchcock. That was
yeah.
the first film he shot. I believe he shot it in silent. It was a silent film, and then like during production or right at the end, then they kind of like turned it into a talkie like towards the end of production.
Right. And
So
we
around
always like to
29.
yeah, we always like to think of 29 as the year sound came in. No, sound was working itself out for the previous decade. That's
Yeah.
just when we finally accepted it because it
Hmm.
was enough, it was up to standard enough of what the audiences in 1929 could do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like Sunrise. Sunrise has
Hmm.
pre-recorded sound effects,
Oh, okay.
but it's still a silent film, sort of.
Hmm.
Oh, and another silent film I really love is King Vidor's The Crowd.
Okay, I've heard of that. What
And
year was it? Like 28?
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
What's
just had to
what's
look
that
that up just
what's
now.
that about?
I don't even remember. It's just a visual smorgasbord. I saw it when I was 19, dude.
Okay. You don't remember when you were 19?
No. God, I hope not. I want to forget everything. The life of a man and woman together in a large impersonal metropolis through their hopes, struggles, and downfalls. So,
So when I
which is also the plot of Sunrise. It just there's also an attempted murder in that one too.
Okay, cool. So in 2028, when I do 100 years ago, I'll definitely look.
Oh
Look at
boy,
that one. That's a long way away. No, maybe I'll watch it before.
yeah,
So my introduction to silent films was actually Laurel and Hardy. My dad brought me up with Laurel and Hardy, and my dad was not into the silent ones. He wanted to just watch like the golden era for them was like 31 to 33, like the short films they made around that time. But when I was like 12, 13, I was like, they did films before sound. So I went and I watched some of their work, and there's this one like I think it's like a Christmas set one with Christmas trees, and they're like going house to house selling stuff that's really funny. And they made, I want to say, at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen silent short comedy subject films before they moved into sound. And that was a case of two guys who their transition to sound was seamless. Like they were great, and like their voices are fantastic. But they could have gone another 10 years in silent film, and it could have worked out too. So that was my introduction to silent films. And then, as you said, horror is great in silent cinema. I'm sure there's more for me to discover, but I love Nosferatu, which was 22, so that's next year for 100 years. And then Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is probably my favorite oldest movie, which was February of 1920 from Germany.
Lord, yeah.
Which is like that's very old. There's not one. I watched Broken Blossoms from 1919 by D.W. Griffith. I actually thought that was pretty good. And then Birth of a Nation, obviously very problematic, and then
Yeah.
Intolerance, and they're just really long. And I mean, they're the mid to late 1910s are just a little bit too old for me. Like I need to get into the 20s for me to really enjoy the film. But I say if
Sure.
I had to pick one from that decade to be, I guess, Broken Blossoms for you to check out. And then I also love Metropolis, of course, which I believe was 26 or 27, one of those. And then my favorite is Passion of Joan of Arc, which is just such a striking movie. What an amazing lead performance. You've seen that one?
Yeah, I saw that in the museum actually. They're the exact right place to see it on a big screen.
Oh, cool. Okay. I can't remember if that screened in film school. I want to know where I saw. I don't remember where I watched that.
Yeah, this was Yerba Buena Gardens in San Francisco.
Okay. I think that one's on Criterion. I think I might have watched it on. I might have rented like the Criterion disc. I think that's
I'm
what it was.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about the year in film of 1921. So I have the list of the 5 most popular films from that year. Number 5, Orphans of the Storm, a drama by D.W. Griffith. D.W. Griffith has what? I mean, a movie almost every year, if not every year. He's always around. This was the last Griffith film to feature both Lillian and Dorothy Gish. Number 4 was The Sheik, directed by George Melford, based on a best-selling romance novel. I have like a vague memory of that title. I feel like I had the CD-ROM in the 90s called Cinemania that had like
Right.
reviews by Roger Ebert and Leonard Maltin. I think there was like a clip or something from The Sheik, or it might have been Son of the Sheik, one of the two,
Yeah.
one of the two silent films. Number 3 was The Three Musketeers, directed by Fred Niblo, based on the 1844 novel. So the third biggest movie of that year was based on that, of course, famous book, The Three Musketeers. Number 2 was The Kid, which we'll discuss in a minute. Do you know what the number 1 box office hit of the year was? It's not one it's not one I watched. It's called The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Oh, I have
you
seen
heard
clips
of
of that. Yes.
Okay. So that beat The Kid. That's the most popular film of 21. Directed by Rex Ingram, based on a Spanish novel. It's regarded as one of the first anti-war films, and it turned then little-known actor Rudolph Valentino into a superstar, which is a name I know,
Yeah,
but I
that
have
sounds
not
about
seen
right.
that one. Yeah.
I have seen some Valentinos, and
Okay.
to go back to that point, another that reminded the Sheik reminded me of the Thief of Baghdad. That's another
Oh yeah.
Douglas Fairbanks. So I have seen a few Fairbanks movies,
Okay.
and that also reminds me that silent was also good for action cinema.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You
Because
could speed up the film.
and swashbuckling, and it was the place where they're doing the most interesting things behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that one, the final sword fight, they put someone's fighting directly at the camera,
Mm-hmm.
so it becomes this weird little piece of terrifying anxiety and claustrophobia.
Okay.
That they were able to get away with.
Oh, cool. And then the one other movie before we get to The Kid, I wanted to mention it. I did say before we started recording, I watched a little of on Turner Classic Movies, and that's The Phantom Carriage, which is also a Criterion movie. But I recorded it on Turner Classic Movies and watched some of it. It's really interesting, like visual effects, like disappearing effects, and all these cool things happening. Not made in the USA, but a foreign film. Had you seen some of that before or heard of that film?
I have. It feels like it's on Turner Classic Movies every other week.
every Sunday night for the silent cinema.
I mean, TCM does that a lot, and not in a bad way. Like they show Gypsy constantly, and Gypsy's in my top 10.
Okay.
So I will watch. I will usually watch the rest of Gypsy if they're showing it.
Okay, if it's on.
Regardless of. Oh yeah, like I might cut out an intermission, maybe.
Okay. There are those movies, right, where like you catch it halfway through, and then you're like, I think I'm gonna watch the rest of this.
But yeah, like I'll turn on because I keep my TV on Turner Classic Movies because I don't really watch television otherwise.
Okay,
Everything else is through streaming.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always just a spoopy image from the Phantom Carriage. I'm like, what the shit is happening?
Yeah. No, usually when I put on Turner Classic Movies randomly, it's like some 50s film I've never heard of. Right. And I'm like, 50s, that's a decade not my favorite for film, is like the 1950s. There's some great gems by people like Hitchcock and things, but some of those kind of like lower tier 50s movies, I'll watch like 10 minutes of it just out of curiosity, and I'm like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, well, it's all very educational to me because it's not like I didn't watch old movies growing up, like the big ones I had seen. But my mom, who did go to film school and graduated like in 70 or 71, I asked her a couple years ago, like, why didn't I know these old films from like pre 1962? She's like, I never gave a crap about them. I don't know why. So I didn't start really watching old movies until I was 18.
Okay, yeah, same here.
Really good video stores, or working at really good video stores, and going to film school, and then working at a film festival. I just didn't have the basis for a lot of these things, which is why I'm more interested in watching something that comes out now than in the past. I will, of course, very much TiVo something off of Turner Classic Movies and watch that and give myself an education and an examination of something that heretofore unknown to me. But it's usually not my first priority.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, especially now during kind of this award season and all these films dropping. Like I finally, since I started the podcast in September of 2020, I've been watching more older films and newer films, and then at like the end of December, I'm like, I've seen nothing from 2020. Someone help! And so I have a list of films, and like just last night, I watched 2 really great films: Boys State, the documentary that won at Sundance, and Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which was just amazing. Like I really just was stunned by it. So I've tried to mix it up, but the last few weeks, I'm like, okay, I need to see more newer films. But that's what's been so great about the podcast, is basically forcing myself to go back and look at some films I maybe wouldn't have looked at. But yeah, so 1921 saw the births of many figures who would go on to be important in the world of cinema. Donna Reed was born in 21, 100 years ago. Carol Channing, Lana Turner, Peter Ustinov, Nancy Reagan, Gene Roddenberry, Deborah Kerr, Charles Bronson, Steve Allen, and the great Rodney Dangerfield.
All right.
So that is a list. That's all the people who would go on to be important in the world of cinema, born in the year of 1921. Do you have any favorites from that list? Any of those people?
I'm a big fan of All in the Family.
Okay.
So Carol. Oh no, I thought you said. Sorry, you said Carol Channing. I thought you said
Yeah,
Carol
no,
O'Connor.
yeah, Carol
Oh
O'Connor
no, well
was I think later.
yeah, sorry, oops.
Or maybe
well, then my favorite would be the other Carol. Would be Carol Channing as a
yeah.
huge fan of Hello Dolly, unrelated to Wally.
Okay.
Huge fan. Saw Bette Midler and David Hyde Pierce a few years ago on Broadway.
Oh, cool.
You said
I should have seen that. I'm really mad at myself that I didn't see Hello Dolly with Bette Midler. That would have been fantastic. I was there for Sunset Boulevard, and my partner just does not like Broadway, so I was only able to see one, and I saw Sunset Boulevard with Glenn Close.
Yeah, reviving the role. Well, Deborah Kerr, speaking of more people from musicals.
The Innocents, an amazing horror film from '61.
Yeah, the one
until recently.
The one film version of Turn of the Screw that I actually like. Yeah,
there's a new one I haven't seen. There's one that came out last year. I haven't seen it, but it's not supposed to be very good.
With Mackenzie Davis.
The Turning, I think it's called.
Yes, it is. It is half of a good movie. I actually would recommend watching it just to see
it's worth a look.
How a movie can completely collapse at the last possible second. I don't want to ruin what they do to it, but it is so strange. Like it's intentionally.
That's what I saw. Someone else said that. I think it was the Breakfast All Day podcast, one of these film podcasts I follow, and they were like, "It's actually pretty good." And then the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes, you walk out so pissed off that you're like, "Why did I watch that?"
It's like the last 2 minutes. Also, it is randomly set in 1993.
Why?
I don't know. Like it opens with like radio saying Kurt Cobain has died or some.
So they can go see. Do they go see Jurassic Park halfway through the movie?
No, I wish that'd be really cool. No, like she listens to it. She gets the babysitting job. She goes to the manor. That's the rest of the movie.
So it doesn't tie into 2020, or it's just in 93.
It's so weird. Mackenzie Davis is great in it, and the kids. It's the girl from Florida Project.
And it's Finn Wolfhard, right?
And Finn Wolfhard, who overacts like crazy, but he knows what movie he's in.
Yeah, I like him. He's a good actor.
Yeah.
Let's see. I love Rodney Dangerfield. He doesn't have a lot of film credits, but boy, when I was a teenager, like Caddyshack, Back to School, and Ladybugs, I loved.
And Rover Dangerfield.
Which I think I saw once. I don't really have a lot of memory of that one. Ladybugs is great, and it plays on TV all the time. To this day, I'll catch it on some channel because it's probably cheap to obtain or something.
God, yes.
But it's not like one of his. It's not one that got any critical acclaim or anything at the time.
Right.
It's I think Back to School is kind of looked at as his best starring role in a movie. And that's a good one too, but there's something about Ladybugs I just really enjoy.
I like it too. I mean, it has not held up.
It doesn't
very well.
Yeah.
It's a little troubling.
The boy putting on it's some of it's a little troubling. Yeah.
And
it makes me
his major movie after that was Meet Wally Sparks, which is also not good.
I remember finding it funny. It's been a long time.
But... It's sort of like Brewster's Millions. Is that what happens in it?
It's like it's something to do with was it inheriting? No, that's a different movie I watched.
Who the hell knows?
He's at a fancy mansion party and there's a lot of shenanigans. I remember that part.
I remember that, and it ends with an on-screen appearance from Ron Jeremy. They show a porn film within the movie that the other person in that film is somebody in that mansion, and it's it's the climax. No, the Rodney Dangerfield movie I really like is him going against type in Natural Born Killers.
Yes, yeah. He's only in a few scenes at the beginning of that movie. He's
one of the scariest performances I have ever seen. That movie hit me at a weird young age because that's the kind of stuff my mom would like to watch is Natural Born Killers, not old black and white movies.
I love when a actor is mostly known for comedy and does is that the only dramatic role he did? Really dramatic? I feel like that's the only one.
As far as I know, but comedians have dark souls, man.
Absolutely.
Most of the funniest people I know that I'm not saying they're covering for something, but they're tapping into something that can be very destructive with the wrong mindset.
Yeah, I mean Robin Williams, one of the funniest men to ever live, and he was a great dramatic actor. John Candy has one scene in JFK, which I really like. His only dramatic anything I think on film.
Right.
But yeah, I just finished reading a book about the making of Caddyshack. It's really great. Chris Nashawati,
Oh,
and it's
good.
called it's a book about the making of, and it talks about Dangerfield. He was like in his mid 50s, around there, 57, I think, when he shot Caddyshack. He was basically not even thinking of a film career at that point. So he was one of those rare occurrences where his big film career came like into his 60s, which is kind of unusual. Usually it's before that.
Yeah, him and Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman, when did he get his start? Like his 40s? Because it was the 80s, right? When he yeah,
pretty late.
Pretty late. So yeah, some of these guys, they start in their 40s or 50s. Kind of interesting. All right, so my favorite director, Alfred Hitchcock, for all these bonus episodes where I go back before 1970, 1971, I like to kind of talk about what he was doing. You know what he was working on in 1921, Marcus?
I do not. Not at all.
He was a title designer from 1920 to 1922. So his first film as director would be The Pleasure Garden in 1925. Before that, he got his start, obviously, overseas. In England, working as a title designer. That was kind of his intro to working in film. So his first ever credit for a movie was The Great Day as title designer in 1920. His 1921 credits for title designer included films called Appearances, The Princess of New York, The Mystery Road, Dangerous Lies, The Bonnie Briar Bush, which I like that title, and The Call of Youth. He was still 4 years away from his directorial debut. So I don't think a lot of people know that. How he got his start in film was as a title designer. Kind of interesting. And then he would move into, I think he did some art direction in like 22, 23, 24. And then he got his first opportunity to direct a movie.
Oh, however you get into the business. Yeah.
And then he would go on to be, working in the industry into the 1970s. He has two films from the 70s I will yet to get to on the podcast, which is kind of cool. Like he was working all the way into 72 and 76 for his last two movies. So we'll get to him on the regular podcast as well. And
that's Topaz and Family Plot?
Topaz was 69. That is a rough. Have you seen Topaz?
No.
I'll never forget. I was at Lake Tahoe with my family, and this guy walks up to me. I think he overheard me saying I liked Hitchcock. He was like, "Oh, you like Hitchcock? You should watch this." And he handed me a copy of Topaz, and I was like, "Oh." But it said Alfred Hitchcock Collection. I was like, yeah, let's watch. And I remember I took it home. My brothers, my parents, we all sat down. And I think we made it 10 minutes and we were like, no, it's very dull.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. And I should have known that his other 70 film was Frenzy, which I really like.
Frenzy 72 is only R-rated movie that has nudity and blood and violence, and it's kind of cool. It's like he's working within the MPAA rating system for the first time.
It's a really aggressive movie. I was
very
shocked.
Aggressive.
I saw that when I was a teenager, because the UC Theater, which is now a nightclub in Berkeley, on his 100th birthday.
Okay.
They showed entire month was double bills of his movies.
Oh, cool. In 100 years old? Was that
or right? It was his birthday.
Because he was born in 1899. Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw these in
99.
Yeah. This is exactly the time when I was just going to movie theaters by myself, taking the bus there, or just walking from Berkeley up the hill into Kensington when I was done.
So that was your introduction to Hitchcock was like that?
No.
Just watching double... Okay.
Oh no, my mother loves Hitchcock.
Okay.
So those are the old movies that I grew up on, were Hitchcock movies.
Okay.
But the ones I hadn't seen, that's how I saw Rope. That's how I saw Rear Window on a big screen. That's how I saw Frenzy, the remake of The Man Who Knew Too Much. Stuff like that.
What a thrill that was when I was younger, to just every year I'd discover like new films of his I'd never seen before, like Frenzy, like Rope. I have seen everything now, so there's nothing to discover at this point, unless there's a lost Hitchcock film. The Mountain, what's it called? The Mountain Eagle, his second film that they never found the print, so maybe that's out there somewhere. Other than that,
it's in a basement in Argentina somewhere.
Like the first cut of The Magnificent Ambersons, Orson Welles.
Yeah, or like.
Do you think that exists somewhere in the world? Like his version of Magnificent Ambersons. I always wonder if like someone will find it
somewhere, but it will not be up to standards.
Yeah, it's got to be deteriorated by now.
Yeah.
All right, so that takes us to our main kind of film for today's episode, and that's Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, the initial cut was about an hour and 8 minutes, hour and 10 minutes. And then in 1971, 50 years later and 50 years ago, which is kind of funny, he actually went back in his early 80s and cut 3 major scenes out of the movie. So the running time dropped down to 53 minutes. And that's the version I watched on Turner Classic Movies. And the music was redone in 71 as well. So the music that we heard, that's from the 71 orchestra.
All right, yeah, I was wondering, but he didn't rewrite the music though. He just re-recorded it.
Yeah, I don't think he rewrote like this. I think they just re-recorded it to just make it sound crisper. Because I don't know about you, Marcus, but the version I watched in Turner Classic Movies, like visually and sound, was pristine. Looked amazing for 21.
Mine was on HBO Max, and it was
okay.
pristine.
Oh, that's right. It was on HBO Max too. Yeah.
Yeah, because HBO Max has a lot of Criterion.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And it's also on the Criterion channel. So there's a lot of ways to watch The Kid. All right, 3 different places you can look at it. But boy, I was so struck. First off, I really, really enjoyed this film. This was a lot of fun. I had never seen it before. I vaguely knew of the story and that he had like a little kid. That was all I knew about it. So I really, especially it was so short. You could really just get into it and enjoy it. And, you don't really feel, the length or anything. Like it goes by really quickly. I was not so hot on the Final Fantasy sequence with the angels. Other than that, I really loved this. This was a lot of fun. What do you think?
We'll certainly get to the final sequence. No, 53 minutes is exactly as long as this needs to be. Chaplin was notorious for shooting forever. I don't even remember how long City Lights took to make.
You look at his the gaps, right? I mean, you have like from 25 to 28 he doesn't, and then 28 to 31, and then he has a 5-year gap between City Lights of 31 to Modern Times in 36. So this is not a workaholic where he's just pumping them out every year.
Very much a perfectionist who didn't always trust himself, is my understanding. This is mostly through other podcasts, like You Must Remember This, which has a wonderful Chaplin episode within the Blacklist miniseries about the making of Limelight. And
which I've
around that, nor I. Around that time, he went to England, his homeland, and then this was during HUAC, and he was barred from re-entering America. I would say
around 52. That's the year of Limelight.
That sounds about right. I should have re-listened to the episode, but if you find it, You Must Remember This. Green Longworth Blacklist episode. Cool. But yeah, he was considered basically a communist. He was an outside agent, and he was banned from entering the U.S. for maybe the rest of his life. I think he was still allowed in at certain points, but he.
Yeah, I think he made one more film in 67, I want to say. He has a film with Marlon Brando. I have not seen that one either. What's it called? A King of something?
Who the hell knows? I really like this. Like I said earlier, I'm more of a Keaton guy because it's just comedy, it's just stunts, and it's just this weird bit of anxiety. He speaks very good to America's fears and issues. Chaplin is kind of mawkish. He's I was afraid to watch this movie because all I know was the one scene of the kid breaking the window and that whole weird little con. I knew that clip of the movie. But I was always sort of warned away from Chaplin's movies because they were just so sappy, and he was always interested in that. And if that's your thing, that's totally cool. But it sort of wasn't the way I was raised, which is weird because I actually quite like corny films nowadays. But I know, like, even at the time, people like Pauline Kael didn't like how awkward he could be about how sentimental his films could be. But The Kid is exactly the right amount of time because it focuses more on the comedy than anything else. Even when it's an emotional scene, there's still a weird gag. Like when they come for the kid, he starts hitting them with a hammer. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah, that's a great like zany scene when they're like trying to take the kid away and the kid's hitting them and he's hitting them and he's like, they have to get the other cop to come up and help.
Right. Yeah. So the kid works because it's still at the point of his life where he's still doing short film gags. Yeah. Just in a longer context. And the older he got, the sappier he got, and he wouldn't really trust his own stories. By that point, he had to lay it on really thick. When the thing is, he is a genuinely great filmmaker, a genuinely good actor, both emotionally and physically, and he proved that he could do emotion and physicality at the same time. But after a while, as sound came in, the balance kind of shifted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This is
exactly.
somebody I still have not seen a lot of his features. I've only seen 5 of his actual features as opposed
Okay.
to his shorts, and they're the big 5. You know, that's The Kid, Modern Times, Great Dictator, Gold Rush, and City
And so, yep,
Lights.
those are the 5 I've seen too. Those are the
Right.
5 I've seen.
Those, like, I looked at Letterbox to see which ones I had seen. It was the first 5 in
Yeah, he
popularity. I'm like,
did.
thanks.
Yeah, and after Great Dictator, I think there was one he did called like Monsieur Verdoux or something in
Mhm.
'47, and then Limelight, and then the '60s film with Marlon Brando, and then that's basically it. So yeah, I mean, I feel like the 5 beloved films of his are these 5 we just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if that's like if you've never seen a Chaplin movie, those are the 5 to watch. I would assume, right?
Yeah. And they're all strong in different ways, but
Mhm.
they all speak really well to class structure. Chaplin, if I remember the Robert Downey Jr. biopic really well, he grew up quite
Mm.
poor, and then
Yes.
used his skills to come over to America, and then he started his own studio in what it was. I think it was Fresno. For a while, like, cinema was not in LA. This was before LA
Yeah.
became the center of film in America. So he was making stuff in like the Bay Area, Northern and Central California, and those were his own films after a while, his own studio.
Yeah, the Turner Classic Movies recording I watched, it was introduced by Jacqueline Stewart, who does the Sunday night silent film series, and she talked about how he had a very difficult childhood, grew up in poverty, and his being a self-sufficient youth. That's kind of why when he grew up to be a filmmaker, he would put everything, all of his hands and feet and toes and everything in one basket. He would do the writing, he would do the directing, he would edit the films, he scored the films, and he was acting in it. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
He did everything. In terms of his like directing of this film, I mean, I think he's a good storyteller. He moves the story along pretty well. I'm assuming maybe the hour and 10-minute version maybe moved a little bit slower. The commentator talked about the scenes that were missing. I can't remember exactly what happened, but like every time he mentioned that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess you don't really need that. Like, that doesn't really add anything to the story. But my big note for this movie was like, it's really not like a zany comic movie. There's a lot of parts of it that are just kind of emotional and sweet. This is not Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, right? It's kind of, he really is more interested in the storytelling and the emotion of it than really. The only really funny sequence for me where I was laughing out loud was him trying to get rid of the baby.
Right, which is so weird. And he sees a stroller, he puts in the stroller, and the woman's like, you can't put a random baby in my stroller. Take your child back.
Yeah.
No, I laugh out loud at most of this because, well, the thing is, I like, as my friend calls, nauseating tonal shifts.
Okay.
And this is a very funny movie dealing with very sensitive subjects, and I
Mhm.
like the fact that it slingshots between that and between just chaos and then a very sweet, quiet story.
Mhm.
Um, but like in the first 5 minutes, so the robbers find the baby in the car,
Yep.
and they hold it, and one of them holds a gun to the baby,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
the
Let's
only
talk
other
about the
time
beginning of this.
yeah, the only other time I've seen somebody holding a gun to a baby is the Hills Have Eyes remake.
The Hills Have. Yeah. I just watched it the other night. I watched. It's not a baby; it's a young girl. But I just watched Assault on Precinct 13 again by
Right.
Carpenter, and I forgot that part where the girl gets shot. I was like, "Oh my god!" It's still shocking 45 years later. But yeah, to see a baby in turmoil like that was really unusual. And people should know this does not start with Chaplin. Like, it starts with the young mother coming out of, what is it, like an orphanage or something. Like, it's her child, but she's walking out of this building. She's very sad. We have a dissolve into like a shot of Christ, right? Like the cross, which is kind of unusual. And then we go into her just abandoning this baby in the back of some car, and they're like crooks, like who want to get rid of the kid, and so you don't see Charlie Chaplin for a little bit of the beginning, and you're trying to figure out how he's going to play a role in this. But I think my favorite like part of that whole zany sequence where he's trying to pawn off the kid was just when he picks up the baby for the first time and he looks up.
Well, I also like he also looks at a sewer and then considers putting the baby in a sewer.
That
And
is a great
stops
scene because
himself
you're like,
from putting the
no.
baby in the sewer.
Like, doesn't
It's
he just kind of like lifts it and kind of looks and then he kind
well,
of puts it down.
and that's the other problem, which I wish I had known growing up with older films, is that before the Hays Code, movies are crazy.
Oh
Movies
yeah.
are absolutely crazy. They are very perverted. They are very violent. They are very strange. And then and then Hollywood bristled at their outward appearance as this den of sin, so they
Mm.
changed everything for 34 freaking years. And so our idea of
Yeah.
like, oh, the old movies are so stiff and they're so puritanical. Oh no, they're not
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while.
As I said before, visually, a lot of the films from the early 30s are kind of stiff, but the subject matter and the
Yeah.
content is actually really interesting. If you look at some of those early 30s films, like what they're actually dealing with in the content's great. I just wish like the visual representation, like visually, it could be up to snuff, not so much. You
Yeah,
know?
no, the thing is, America has always been kind of a horny, weird, violent culture. We just pretended for
Yeah.
40 years that it wasn't. And that has unfortunately affected how we view how we do politics and how we do
Mhm,
social issues, and it's very strange. And a lot of that
mhm,
is really tied into the art we produced, especially for film and television.
mhm.
Because theater, while censored, not nearly as censored.
Yeah.
Music, not
Mhm,
nearly as censored.
mhm.
But going back to this weird like opening of him dealing with the baby, um, and
Yeah.
he finally accepts the baby, and then he
Yep.
goes to his tenement,
Mhm.
and he runs
He
into the
does. He
women.
doesn't live in a place of luxury by any means.
No, he lives literally at 69,
Okay.
which had to have been a joke. Who knows? But then
Yeah.
he like turns to the woman, all the women there, and he's basically like, "Can you help me with baby?" And they're like, "What's its name?" And he goes inside and comes out again and says, "It's John." So the implication is that he went to check the child's genitals off screen and then came
Yeah.
back, which is a
Which,
which is a great joke.
yeah, that was actually a great joke that I didn't get the first time. It wasn't until I watched the commentary that it made sense. I was like, oh, I thought he was just like trying to come up with a name.
No, it was
Actually, pretty funny.
looking for genitals, not the
Looking for,
child.
yeah, exactly. And the baby. And the other note I made about that sequence was like, it must have been kind of tricky to film a long comic sequence like that with an actual baby. Right? Like, I feel like
A
that would
lot
be
of it is just this, but like in a blanket.
like holding. But I'm sure he wanted to get to the 5 years later, right?
Oh
Because
God,
that's when
yes.
we meet Jackie Coogan, a young Jackie Coogan, I believe was 4 years old, at least when he started shooting the film. And he is a delight in this. He is such one of the best, like young 4, 5, 6 year old actors I've seen in a movie. He is just great in this. I
And
don't
yeah,
know.
he'd only done like two, three things before
Mhm.
this. Chaplin and other people said he was a great mimic, which is why he was perfect for
Okay.
Chaplin films.
Yeah, but he's like great emotion throughout this movie. You really feel for him. He's kind of sly and mischievous, and like he's a great piece. I mean, I think a piece of why this movie works is because of Jackie Coogan.
I think it specifically works
Yeah,
because of Jackie Coogan, because
like
a
that could
lot
have
of
been a
silent
very
films,
dull. That could have been a very dull, just blah kid, and it wouldn't have worked.
yeah, like with these old comedies, especially, you need somebody to bounce off of, which is why Modern Times is my favorite Chaplin film
Hmm.
because his co-star is equal to him. She is giving him
Hmm.
everything, and the supporting character has to hold on to a lot of the theme while Chaplin is around being the tramp, being an idiot.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, and he seemed to get that very early on, that you need the co-star, not necessarily to be a straight man or just be a bouncing card,
Hmm.
but to actually hold up so much of the film that
Hmm.
he, as his character, cannot.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get. So you didn't like the shenanigans of the boy throwing the
Oh no, I did.
throwing the
I
rocks
just
at the. I like him breaking the window, and literally 2 seconds later, there comes Chaplin with his window. Oh hi, yes. It's just like, of course, it's a stunt, right? Like, of
no,
course,
it
it's a con
wasn't
game.
it wasn't that I was like I didn't like the scene. Is that it felt like the sentimentality, like, oh, I don't know how to explain it. It seemed cheesy when I had first seen
Okay.
that scene, and I filled in what I thought the rest of the movie was just this weird weepy about orphans.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's some of that to an extent, but I
Some of
mean
it,
it could have been an hour of con games, and that would have gotten really tiresome, and it kind of does away with that after a few
and it's
minutes.
such a weird con. It makes me laugh.
Of all the things to make money, he's got the glass behind him. Oh hi, do you need help? Oh yes, you have a broken window here. Let me help you.
Weird. Like if somebody did that to me, I'm like, wait a freaking second. I wouldn't like need a cop. I would just chase them off.
Yeah, and the
But then
lady's like, "Oh, thank God you're here! Look what just happened." It's like, duh.
it
Like, I think this is a con game of some kind.
and then it becomes a really great clowning scene of slapstick and shtick, where
Mhm.
they're trying to escape the cop, and really all they're using to get away from him is a doorway, and just
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
changing the pattern of what they're doing and where they're standing, which is
Mhm.
the lovely thing about slapstick comedy is the sheer unreality of it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
Um,
Chaplin always understood exactly how fast these things needed to be.
uh-huh. Yeah, I do like there's parts of this movie where this like the film is sped up a little bit and it like it just adds like a bit of humor to it. It's like nobody can really run that fast, but okay, we'll go with
Yeah,
it.
which is now abused in modern films, trying to reflect that era.
Oh, okay.
They don't understand. It's like, oh, it's zany. No, it's used to increase the joke.
Hmm.
The zaniness is not just that it's sped up; it's what the
Hmm.
speeding up is doing to the sequence.
Hmm. And I like the sequence that follows soon after that, where it's like the little boy meets the bully, and they're having a brawl around a bunch of adults who are just watching this. I was like, what?
It's
But that,
it's
but I like that part with the bully's older brother coming in, and Chaplin's like, oh, okay, you want to fight me? No, thanks.
the guy who looks like he is one giant torso.
Yeah.
It's such a great little piece of costume and padding, because it's great shorthand. This movie is just nonstop shorthand in
Hmm.
wonderful ways. And then that older bully swings so hard that a sign flips behind, like,
Yeah.
over Chaplin's head. But that scene was so weird. I'm like, what is these people are watching children boxing each other? They might as well be betting on it. And I'm like, is this the TV show Cobra Kai? What is happening?
Yeah, exactly.
A bunch of emotionally traumatized young people beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
1921 was wild, man.
1921. Yeah. But so we have more story here. Also, we meet the woman, the mother, 5 years on, and she's like a famous actress of like the stage, right? I don't know if it was clear if she was in films too, but she was like a famous actress now. And she's like going around to like the slums to like for charity and stuff, and like she actually bumps into her own child, and they have like a nice little moment where they look at each other and smile. And she walks off. So that I thought he like kind of brings her in a pretty good way. Like it's not too forced. It could have been more forced, I think. But the way kind of her story plays out, I thought was pretty, seamless with the rest of the movie.
It was nice. She's kind of a non-character, but I do like
Yeah.
what she represents and how she is used, as you just said.
Hmm.
But like the searching for the child you gave up. Now that your life is different, it had a very not to state this TV show again, it had a very This Is Us quality to it, and that's currently what's happening on the TV show This Is Us at
Oh,
this very moment.
okay. Yeah. And then there's that great comic sequence where, as we mentioned before, they're trying to kind of take the kid away from him. And when he actually when they actually do take the kid and they start driving away, he actually gets up on the rooftops and starts running across to like, and I'm like, oh my God, they're actually going to do this sequence. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we've seen that in so many other movies of more recent. Like, oh, it's kind of, I wonder if this was kind of the beginning of that whole concept of like, the chase. I mean, even Buffy Summers does it at the end of the Buffy when
Right.
she's running along the rooftops to jump on top of the school bus.
It reminded me of these are of course related films: Cutthroat Island and Pirates of
Okay.
the Caribbean 4 on
Okay.
Stranger Tides, which both start with a similar sequence,
Okay.
especially the Pirates of the Caribbean one. Because imagine Johnny Depp in a carriage and rooftops and crap like that.
Okay. Yeah. So
And that,
this,
that
I
was
mean,
Rob Marshall, who I'm sure knows Chaplin films.
Rob Marshall. So yeah, see now they can say, "Oh, I'm paying homage to the kid."
Yeah.
We're not just copying what he did back then. But I thought the editing of that sequence was really solid, and and it's for again, it's not so much I'm like laughing at it. I'm like, I want him to get to Jackie Coogan, like get the kid back. You really root for Chaplin to be with this kid. Like they really care for each other. Those scenes where they're just like eating that one scene where he has like the giant like room size can, and he just like takes like three huge globs of food and just throws it as his kid's plate, and it's like piled high like 6 feet tall, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. A lot of Stevie pointed this out because she watched it with me too. She's like, a lot of Chaplin's comedy is based around food, and I don't know if that ties into
Yep.
class or anything, but like,
The gold
and
rush. Hmm.
very much. And then the kid makes these delicious looking 100-year-old
Oh
flapjacks.
my gosh, looks so yummy. I was like, make
I
me
was like,
some,
"Ooh,
Jackie.
good job."
And they got like, is that syrup he had? Like he pours a little something on it, and I'm like, is that
Oh, right.
1921 maple syrup?
And then Chaplin like rolls up his pancake and like,
Yeah, and
and
then
then
he like
he.
and they pours it. Yeah.
I'm like, hey, that's an option if you, especially if you don't have utensils.
So I'm happy that he allowed for quiet moments of just the two of them in that room, just kind of like being together. I thought that added a lot of heart to the movie. And then I mean, they eventually make their way. What was it, like a halfway house, like that? What's that place called where there's like a bunch of people in the space
It's just a
and
flop house.
the flop house, and then there's a reward that like the owner of that place finds. Like, oh, I think I saw this kid. I'm gonna go
Which
turn him in. You know?
and I do this with every old movie where money is brought up. I put it into inflation calculator,
Yeah.
and the reward is like $15,000 in today's
Oh,
money.
wow. What was it in the movie? Like
I
a
don't
hundred.
remember.
It wasn't very much, right? But in inflation, it's 15 grand. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, he was
Um,
like, I am taking this kid. Like I'm
well,
giving him out.
and we learn about that reward through the guy who runs the flop house, this large man, and we
Mhm.
see it on the newspaper that he's reading, and it's an insert of the newspaper, but the newspaper is heaving and recoiling with this actor's breath, and clearly
Mhm.
the actor wasn't there. So I like the the granular nature of Chaplin saying no. The newspaper has to look like it's on a large man's stomach and is
Mm.
moving within the shot. That was an oddly particular directorial choice that I admired.
Mm.
Because
Yeah, exactly.
really can just hold up a newspaper and audiences are fine with that. It's like no, the newspaper has to breathe. And this is the kind of stuff that makes you realize why his movies take 2 years to make.
Yeah.
It's very David
Yeah.
Fincher. It's very Kubrick.
Hmm. Yeah. Even the kid, right? He shot over a year, and this is a fairly brief running time.
Right.
So yeah, that's why a lot of these later films, it's like, yeah, it's definitely a Kubrick kind of like, I will take 12 years between films. It's like Kubrick,
He's like,
he's
excuse
not.
me, I'm gonna.
It's like the total opposite of Terrence Malick, right? Terrence Malick, who's doing like 20-year gaps and 10-year gaps, and then around 2011 is like, I'm going to pump out one a year. It's like, what?
It's
Okay.
so weird. Well, and Kubrick will like he'll edit his films on a boat because he hated to fly.
Oh.
So like 2001 was just edited on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic or some weird crap like that. What a weird person. Incredibly influential filmmaker with a lot of weird issues.
Yeah. So yeah, he was not super prolific, Chaplin, at least once he got into his features. And it is kind of watching this, it feels like a movie that would have been shot over the course of a few weeks and cut
You
together
know?
pretty quickly. And it's like, this was like a year and a half, but from start of production to release was a year and a half. That's kind of crazy.
Especially back then. You can crank out movies in a couple months,
Oh yeah.
well into the 50s, depending on what kind of movie you're making.
Yeah, I'm doing a year of Betty Davis, and I started a few weeks ago with her films of the early 30s. And like, what was it, 1932 or 33? She had like 9 credits in 1 year. I'm like, oh my God.
God.
So I didn't watch all of them. I just would pick. I'm just picking
God
one.
bless her.
But God, she is so strikingly gorgeous at the very beginning of her career. Like, it's like, wow. Like I had never seen a really early Davis film before. So yeah, so I'm going to be looking at some more of her films into the 30s. So yeah, what else about this film? So the baby is taken away, or the young child's taken away, Jackie Coogan, and he has kind of like another kind of meet and greet with the real mom, and he doesn't seem to be kind of put off by her, right? He's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I'll spend some time with this woman.
Yeah.
And we have this final fantasy sequence, which really kind of like confused me at the end. What was your take on this final sequence?
Loved it. It's a dream ballet.
Yeah.
You know I like musicals, and so he like this. This is the 11 o'clock number. This is the final sequence in
Yeah.
American in Paris. It's all very similar. Here's this weird fantasy sequence of all of his bizarre anxieties done as loudly
Yeah.
as possible as what you can get away with at the time.
I
It's
felt like
people.
there needed a little bit of setup. Don't you? Like there was there any other fantasy in the movie?
No,
Like
I
it
don't
just comes
know.
out of nowhere.
It comes out of nowhere. And I'll just chalk that up to it was 1921, and we still were kind of figuring out editing at that time.
Yeah.
But I like it because all the impressive wire work
Yes,
that's
which was
happening,
really cool.
and of course they're sitting on the stoop, and then an angel dog gets wire work floated into their scene and
Yeah.
just kind of looks confused, like,
Yeah.
what the hell just happened? Loved it. Laughed my ass off at that because
Yeah,
I
just
was
he'll just
not
like
expecting
randomly
it.
fly. You don't
But yeah,
expect it.
yeah. So, and this is not to be patronizing, but yeah, a dream ballet is something that happened. That it is a foundational element of American musical theater
Mhm.
where you're near the end, everything, all hope is lost, and then you relive the story in a 5 to 10 minute dance sequence
Oh, okay.
to remind you what's happening, especially since first acts are usually way longer than second acts.
Mhm.
On the Town, both stage and screen, has a wonderful dream ballet.
Mhm.
What's That Story has one. Oklahoma has a major one.
Mhm.
And then usually the story's over within 10 minutes after the end of the dream ballet. So this is a version of that.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So he is retelling the story as fast as possible, just to
Mhm.
remind you of where you are, but he's doing it in a weird, fun way. So
Mhm.
even when dream ballets are not always great, I still eat them up because I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
cool, we're a different genre for a second. This is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's definitely, doing something different, and I think I would have liked it more if the movie itself doesn't end so abruptly. It's like
Right.
he wakes up, he goes and finds the boy and his mother, and she invites him in, which I don't know what that means. I guess he's just going to hang out with the kid for another hour and then leave.
Right.
I don't know. You
Well,
don't really know.
it's
But it
pretty
just ends
ambiguous.
so abruptly. I kind of wanted one more scene. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we always like to say that, but currently movies nowadays, I would say, take too long to get started and take too long to wind
To get
down.
out, yeah. Yeah, no,
So I'm actually very happy for it. So yes, we wish for it because we're imagining what else could be. But the trade-off is it's probably useless.
yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. I don't really know what else he could have done after that last shot to really
Leave them wanting more.
leave
Always
them
leave
wanting
them
more.
wanting more. Something I need to learn every time I write something because I forget it sometimes because I'm not that great at subtext because I love musical theater where everything is very much out into the open and sung and it's danced.
Oh, I'm like the opposite. Like I've gotten so many rejections from agents and editors who say the ending's too abrupt, the ending's too fast. You have to like let it breathe a little. And
Mm,
I'm like, it's over. The story is over. I
it's
have one
over.
final scene. Like I need to write 5 more scenes. Like no, it's
Trust
over.
your readers' imaginations. Believe me, your audience, whether they're reading it or they're watching it, they will imagine something better than what you have in your head.
Yeah,
95% of the time, just trust them. We have infinite imaginations. Rely on that.
absolutely. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun to watch for the very first time. As I said, I'd seen his other 4 really famous films: The Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times, and The Great Dictator. I'd not seen The Kid before, so it was nice to discover it for the first time, watch it with a commentary, watch it with some behind the scenes info while I was taking a look at it. Just really interesting, kind of to learn more about his career at that time. Before he really became famous, like into the 20s, late middle to late 20s. My last question about this movie, Marcus, which is kind of tricky with this one, but if The Kid were made today, what would be different about it? If this story were made today?
It would star Bruce Willis and Spencer Breslin.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that movie. The
Yeah,
Disney movie. Is
Disney's The
that
Kid.
is that this story?
I've never seen it. I do not think so.
I never saw it either. I don't think I like vaguely remember the poster. It's like Bruce Willis like looking up.
Yeah,
I
I'm
never
just
saw
making
that.
I'm just making a dumb joke. Don't worry about me.
Oh, okay. I thought it was actually a remake of this movie. I
You know
have
what? I'm
no
gonna look it up now. I don't think it is, but I know it involves
the
an
title was
airplane.
Disney's The Kid. Is
Yeah,
that the title?
or just the kid on IMDb.
Was that
And
2000? Was that the year that came
yep,
out? Okay.
an unhappy and disliked image consultant gets a second shot at life when he is mysteriously confronted by an 8-year-old version of himself.
Oh, okay. So no.
So not at
So
all.
maybe
Oh, it,
the closest film we've had to this would be what, Baby Boom, starring Diane Keaton, which is also
which
about her kind of getting like all of a sudden a kid one random day.
which is sitting on my DVR, and I have not seen it yet.
Oh, it's really fun. If you like
Oh,
Diane
cool.
Keaton, it's great.
I'm indifferent to Diane Keaton.
Yeah.
She can be wonderful, especially in Alan's films, especially like in interiors. But
Yeah.
she through either her own reasons or the world, she got typecast in and didn't really grow out of that box after a while.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like her last 2 really good films were Something's Gotta Give and The Family Stone. In the last 15 years, I mean, Morning Glory, she's pretty good in that. Like,
She's really good in that. Yeah.
it's kind of been a rough 15 years for her career. She hasn't really had a a great dramatic vehicle or anything.
Yeah, I'll watch Baby Boom. Absolutely.
Baby Boom's fun.
Cool. And I don't dislike her at all. But I feel like I've seen what she can do.
So but that's like the story of a person who's not expecting a child to come into their lives and how they deal with it. That's very
Sure.
much the same story as Baby Boom. But I'm trying to think, like, if they were to take this story and do it now, like what do you think would be vastly different about it in 2021?
It would not be a comedy.
It wouldn't be a comedy.
No, even in the 90s when Steve Martin was given sort of a similar story in A Simple Twist of Fate.
Oh, right.
He made it a drama.
Okay.
It was,
you think
it's
it'd be
not
a drama.
comedy. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of unprepared for this. Let me think through. It would be darker. I feel like it would
be a horror film.
I don't want it to look like oh God, well, I think it was called Gifted. It was from the guy who did the two Spider-Man movies we don't talk about anymore.
Mark Webb.
Mark Webb made a Chris Evans movie called Gifted.
Okay,
it's not about suddenly having a kid. It's about he's a single father with a genius child.
Okay.
And they would probably make like the Christian film version of this.
Okay.
It would be very sappy, very sentimental, and I wouldn't be interested. Yeah. I would personally like the movie I would watch would be more like Ryan Gosling's Half Nelson.
Yes, great movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the directors of Captain Marvel.
That's right.
Yeah, Bowden and Fleck. And I like Captain Marvel. It is not their best movie.
Yeah.
Like they made a wonderful minor league baseball movie called Sugar.
Okay, I don't know that
one. Lovely film. I think that's them. Sugar. It's set in Puerto Rico, I think, or it's about a Puerto Rican playing in the minor leagues.
Yeah, so I mean, it would obviously depend on the director. If I don't really know. I mean, I assume this is out in the public domain, right? The kid isn't. Didn't I read recently early 20s movies? Aren't they in the public domain?
I think we're at 25 now.
25. Okay.
Yeah, whatever year Great Gatsby came out, that's the year.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That's
Great Gatsby and Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy, aka A Place in the Sun.
Okay.
That story is now public domain.
So that's the same as for literature and for film. If it's 25 or before, it's public domain.
I believe so.
Okay. So we're going to see a lot of Great Gatsby adaptations in the next 5 years?
We already are. And the thing is, Great Gatsby is a great story, but there are other books that are also now recently in the public domain that people should also look at. I do not want to see a bunch of Great Gatsbys. I've already seen a bunch of Great Gatsbys. It's called The Great Gatsby.
Exactly.
And one person had that Muppet Great Gatsby script already written that they released the day that it was publicly allowed.
Oh, they had it ready to go, and then the day it became.
I do not think he Chuck Tingled it into existence, writing it in one night. I think he had it ready. If they made it nowadays, the thing is, it wouldn't be made nowadays because we don't make mid-budget dramas or dramedies anymore.
That's true. Yeah,
it would not exist. It would be an independent film.
It would be like a small little side story in a Marvel movie,
right?
About a kid.
And the thing is, our children acting laws are different to the point that while we're on Jackie Coogan, I know that we're wrapping up, but there is a law named after Jackie Coogan, the Coogan Act, which because after he was a child star and he was merchandised like crazy, when he came of age, his parents had spent it all. Well, his parents had spent a lot of it, and then his dad, he was in a car crash. He survived a car crash that killed his father and two of his siblings, and so he was left with his mother and his mother's and his stepfather, who was their financial manager. And they took all the money from him and said, I actually had it written down. The mother insisted no promises were ever made to give Jackie anything and claimed he was a bad boy. So an entire law was created in California where 50% of whatever he was making could be put into a trust that they could not touch. And he would, at this point, he had made $2-3 million in 1920s money. He was worth $50 million, and it was all gone, which led to the rest of his career where he's in I just saw him in an Elvis movie, Girl Crazy. And he's also in this really stupid piece of crap called Sex Kittens Go to College, which is also on TCM. It was on TCM Underground, where he plays a weird oil baron. And then after that, he gets to be Uncle Fester, which is what I know him from, because I adore the Addams Family.
Yeah, I
I
had no
adore
idea
it.
until I listened to the commentary on the kid, and he was like, "Oh," and then he would go on to play Uncle Fester, or maybe it was one of the supplements on the Criterion, and I was like, "What?" Like I watched that show a lot when I was younger. I did not know that. I did not
Yeah.
put that together, obviously, because he's 4 years old and the kid, but the fact that that's the same person is kind of interesting.
That is the one thing I knew about the kid is that, oh, it's little Uncle Fester.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I think he was in the Champ, the boxing movie. That was his
okay.
other breakout,
Oh, cool.
which was the one that was remade with John Voight and
Oh
Ricky
yeah,
Schroeder, who
John
have
Boyd.
revealed themselves to not be the greatest people.
Yeah.
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 So if you make it now, it would be different. It would be way less about the kid because we have these proper laws in place. You could not just shoot a kid for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Is anyone going to attempt a remake of any Chaplin movie? I don't know how you do that.
no, it'd be
I
terrible.
feel like you would take the idea of the kid and then make it something different and just,
Right.
I don't think you would try to for someone today to do the Tramp. I don't think that would work. So you'd have to
Right.
like figure out a different genre or something. I mean, the storyline of the movie, you could kind of pull into any decade. It doesn't have to be in the 20s, but I feel like the character of the Tramp is its own thing, and you can't really replicate that.
Oh God, no. And the tramp wasn't who he was. It was just his. It's just a weird persona that he wasn't even in all of his stuff. That he,
Yeah,
I think, got sick of. That's
he
why
got,
he tried to make other movies, and people rejected them.
yeah, yeah. He made
Um,
a drama, as I said, in 23, and people just rejected it. So then Gold Rush 2 years later, he's the Tramp again.
yeah. So in the U.S., this would not be a mainstream film. It would be television.
Mm,
This is where these stories have gone
yeah. I mean,
entirely.
like TV, like network TV, or like streaming,
Both.
or both. Okay, yeah.
There's not a lot of difference, honestly.
I want to see a 10-episode limited series of the kid.
Oh God.
10 hours. Some properties should not be 10 hours, I think.
Many properties should not be 10 hours. I think the worst thing about streaming is how long these things are.
Yeah.
They're finally looking at the British model and keeping things a little shorter.
Yeah, there
But
was this tendency when it was 13 episodes, it was like you'd get like episodes 4 through 11 where it was a lot of filler, you know? It's
right,
like start really strong and end strong, but the middle you'd be like,
it
okay,
was
come
the
on.
worst. Even good shows like season 1 of Jessica Jones had that problem.
Mm,
But
yeah.
otherwise, I didn't like any of the Netflix Marvel shows. They all had the exact same problem.
Yeah, the 13 episodes. I think those shows would have been better at 8 episodes. Like I think
They were
13 was too much.
so rough.
So to end here, Marcus, if you had to pick like a favorite Charlie Chaplin movie of those 5, I believe you said Modern Times. Is that your favorite? Why is that your favorite of the 5?
I think it's where theme, comedy, tragedy all come together, and I think it is his most handsomely made production. I
Mhm.
think it uses special effects in a very forward-pushing way. There's that sequence where they're in that department store when it's closed, and he has a blindfold on and is roller skating, and he keeps on getting really close to the edge,
Mhm.
and then going away, and then getting close to the edge. Not
Mhm.
that is all in camera trickery. I know that there's the shaving machine, like the wake you up machine that like shaves him and feeds him.
Yeah.
That took him like a week to shoot or something like that. It's where his granular perfectionist nature worked perfectly because
Mhm.
the kid, for all of its really good material, emotional material, how funny it is, it's not a very expensive looking movie. It all looks pretty cheap, which is the point. But it does
Mhm.
look like a soundstage. At no point did I ever feel like, oh, he's in LA, except for the chase sequence and a
Okay.
couple of the exterior shots. Modern Times is where his filmmaking tendencies, I think, are at his best
Yeah.
of those 5. It is
Yeah.
gorgeous to look at. The visual nature of it helps the theme instead of just
Mhm.
as a backdrop. And it probably holds up better now than it did when it came out.
Mm.
It has a really strong meaning, and that's also
Mhm.
where we get "Smile," his song "Smile,"
Okay.
which is a gorgeous song that we still play nowadays.
Mhm.
Um, I just think it's where he's firing on all cylinders in a
Mhm.
way that he isn't quite in other ones. Because like the kid is really good when you come down to it, it's still just a tramp and a kid doing silly things.
Yeah. Has
Modern
some
times
emotion. Yeah.
Modern Times is about the destruction of capitalism
Mhm.
made very visual. He literally is a cog in the system at one point. It's not subtle, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, and like
And how much dialogue is in Modern Times for 1936? It's still pretty close to being silent film, right? There's just
I believe so.
just a few moments of dialogue, but it's very much a silent film.
Yeah. It's the one that actually hits me in the feels, which is, like I said, I'm an
Yeah.
emotional viewer, and that's
Mhm.
the one that, especially when I was younger, I didn't really get it. I thought Gold Rush was better, but Gold Rush is mostly a lot of gags in a
Mhm.
new setting. Modern Times is a full film that could stand up nowadays. I think it's better than City Lights. I
Okay.
think City
Yeah.
Lights is way too obsessed with its themes that it
Mhm.
suffocates everything else. The scenes I like in City Lights are the physical comedy ones, like the
Mhm.
boxing scene.
Yeah.
Modern Times also has it has that restaurant scene. I think is in Modern Times, which is trying to serve this entire room of chaotic people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when everything kind of comes together in harmony. That's why.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. It's been a long time. I don't really have much to add. The film that introduced me to Chaplin was in film school at LMU. We watched Modern Times on the big screen, and I think it was like
Ooh.
a print. It was really gorgeous, and I remember just really being taken with it. And after that, I went and watched Gold Rush and City Lights pretty soon thereafter. And yeah, I mean, I think City Lights might be a lot of people's favorite. The ending, of course, is very emotional, but yeah, for me it's Modern Times. I think that's like the peak of his career, peak of his mastery as a technical artist and as an actor and as a director. I would agree. I would say Modern Times is fantastic. All right, so thank you, Marcus, for being on the podcast today. This was a lot of fun. For our listeners who might not have heard the last episode, where can they find you online, or if you have anything to promote, now would be the
Uh,
time to do it.
Yeah, you can find me at marcusgorman.com.
Okay.
I also run a website called 10 Years Ago. It's at 10yearsago.wordpress.com, where we
Mm-hmm.
look at films on their 10th anniversary. I'm
Absolutely.
currently in the middle of programming for Seattle International Film Festival 2021, which
Sweet.
will be virtual this year from
Okay.
April 8th through 18th. We are now watching submissions, and we'll start dealing with solicited films, and we'll have our program locked down, and then I'll take over as a publications editor, which I've been doing with them for 8 years. And while that's happening, I am I am workshopping a few of my plays, and I'm looking to record one of them as a podcast. But that's still
Oh,
very,
cool.
very, very early in that
Mm-hmm.
process, to the point that I'm having a reading to see if it's even viable as a podcast.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's fantastic. I look forward to reading more about your upcoming festival. And
Mhm.
if you do your play as a podcast, send me the link. I'd
Sure,
love to
sure,
listen.
of
It'll be
course.
fantastic. All right, so yeah, thank you, Marcus, for being here again on Film at 50, and thank you to all of you for listening. We will catch you next time. Have a good day.
Later.